I want you to understand, the Chinese culture and dealing with Chinese suppliers. So some things to understand about the culture is their negotiation tactics. So no does not always mean no, and yes does not always mean yes. Sometimes yes means no, and sometimes no means yes. So what do I mean by that? Well, if they tell you, no, I don't like that price, or no, I don't do this, that doesn't always mean a no. Sometimes they're just trying to drive a hard bargain, and I'm going to give you an example of that. If they say yes, that doesn't always mean yes too. So until you have, the deal inked, or the money's through PayPal, or you sent the money and they've agreed to ship it, and you've done the entire deal, yes does not always mean yes. Sometimes they're just trying to save face. As they say in Chinese culture, there's no permanent enemy, no permanent friend. So keep that in mind. Just important things to understand. I'm kind of blowing it up a little bit. I don't want you to be scared, because it's very, very easy to negotiate with them, and they're used to dealing with, a lot of people from all over the world, obviously because China is the #1 manufacturing country in the world. But it's just something to keep in mind. The majority of you will source from Alibaba, and you will talk to Chinese suppliers. I'm going to give you some other examples of how to approach approach that problem differently. But I want to leave you, before we actually get into that really fast, with an example of how Chinese people, kind of negotiate. So if I were going to walk into, a house, what would I do? Well, I'm pretty straightforward. I live in the Western world. I live in the United States. I might say, okay, I don't like this or that, but I like the overall thing of the house. And we might go look at a couple other houses, that I'm going to buy. And then potentially I might be honest with my realtor and say, okay, I like this. I'm thinking about this. My wife's leaning towards this. Don't have a wife, but just to give you an example. And it's pretty straightforward. There's no kind of underlying messages. Well, Chinese people negotiate and drive harder bargains a lot differently. So what was the first thing that they're going to do when they walk into a house to purchase that house? They're going to start criticizing things. They're going to start criticizing, I don't like this door. I don't like that fan. I don't like the chandelier. I really don't like the kitchen. And what they're doing is, you might think that, okay, they're clearly not interested in this house. They're criticizing everything. But actually what they're doing is they're setting up a negotiation tactic, so they have things to fall back on when they go to sign. They say, oh, I don't like this, that, and that, but if you give me the right price, I'm willing to buy it. So that's the same thing when you're sourcing products and you're sourcing and talking to Chinese suppliers. They're trying to drive a hard bargain. And that's important to keep in mind. So no doesn't always mean no. Yes doesn't always mean yes. Make sure that you negotiate. Don't just take their word for it, and keep that in mind. You want to talk to at least 10 suppliers, at least. I see people, this is probably one of the #1 mistakes I see people make. They hop on Alibaba or any of these websites I'm about to get into, and they talk to 3 suppliers and they pick one. That is a huge mistake. Not only, first and foremost, because you're typically just typing something into the search bar and then you're picking one of the top 5 suppliers, but everybody is doing that. So everybody that's sourcing that potential product, or sourcing that potential product in the future, is going to have the same supplier with the same supply chain, with the same capacity. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that. However, it's just important to keep in mind, you kind of want to differentiate yourself if you can. So not just that, you also want to negotiate on price. You want to talk to 10 different suppliers from different places, because you can not only hear different minimum order quantities, which is something we'll talk about in the next lecture, but you can also talk about different prices per unit, different potential shipping options. So you want to get all these things together, and then obviously your price per unit too. So talk to 10 different suppliers. Why do I say that? Because you'll start to see similarities. This one sticks out as being terrible. This one sticks out as really, really good, but they don't have the best ratings. These 3, basically have the same minimum order quantity, price per unit, and shipping options. So which one do I like better out of all of these? It'll give you a better rounded example of who's a good supplier, who's not, who's playing hardball, and who can kind of move on their price. If somebody's really, really low and they don't have really good ratings, well, you probably want to steer clear away from them. If somebody's really, really high but they have good ratings and everybody else is telling you a different price with different options, well then maybe no doesn't necessarily mean no. They're just trying to drive a hard bargain. So keep that in mind. Talk to 10 suppliers at least. Don't skimp on this. This is where you're going to set up your supply chain. Once you get a supplier, you're going to stick with that supplier for probably for the majority of your private label journey with that product. So this is one of the most important steps. Product research is probably the most important. But don't skimp on talking to suppliers. Get a variety so you can make the best informed decision of who to go with. Don't just hop on Alibaba and source from Alibaba. There's nothing wrong with Alibaba. I've sourced 3 of my products from Alibaba, one from a different place. But keep in mind, everybody goes to Alibaba. You have to deal with a lot of different things. You could potentially deal with customs fees. You could potentially deal with a bunch of different things because it's Chinese. Not to mention the language barrier, the communication barrier. There's nothing wrong with this. You can get great prices and great deals on Alibaba, but there's also DHgate, there's also Thomasnet, and there's also Google. You can use anything at your disposal to find manufacturers or suppliers. You can simply Google someone in your area and there might be somebody with a different price. You would be surprised if you just looked. Don't just hop up on Alibaba and assume that they have the best prices because they're Chinese manufacturers and you can get the best deal there. Check into the other places too. Check into DHgate, check into Thomasnet, check into Google, and see, if you live in the States, maybe Google somebody that's in the next state over, or, somewhere relatively close that you can kind of, basically get your stuff, into Amazon faster because it's closer. That's another added advantage. So I'm just kind of opening your mind. I'm basically just saying, don't just pick Alibaba and settle. Look at all the other ones. There's nothing wrong with picking Alibaba. If you end up seeing the best person on Alibaba or the best supplier on Alibaba, great, go with that. That's totally fine. But don't just assume. That's a mistake, so don't assume. And finally, the most important thing of this entire lecture right here is picking air shipping and saying you want the price to your door. So when you ask for a quote, there's different options, like we talked about before, and we'll talk about in the next lecture. We're going to talk about minimum order quantity, which is literally the minimum order quantity, the minimum amount of items that you can order from that supplier at once. You have to order at least 100 or they're not going to do business with you. That's an example. So you want to ask for air shipping because if it's coming from, especially over from China and Alibaba specifically, you're going to want air shipping and not freight on board. Freight on board means they're going to ship it, via carrier or via transport boat, and it's going to take weeks to get into Amazon. So you want to ask for air shipping. Yes, it's going to be more, but it's worth it. That's why freight on board is so cheap, or FOB. So air shipping, and you want to ask for at the very end when you're finally about to, secure the deal with your Chinese supplier. Ask for what's the price for air shipping and what's the price to my door. The price to your door basically indicates all these things together because you don't want to get caught, shipping or paying $4 a unit, but then finding out that, oh, your thing got caught in customs, or, oh, there's this added charge. What you want to know is the price to your door, because obviously your door is going to be the Amazon warehouse that you tell them to send it to, and you can print that all out, once you figure out, how many things, once you set up your listing, once you figure out how many, essentially you're ordering, then obviously you're just going to print that sheet out and then give that to your supplier, or not print it out, but you'll send that to your supplier and they'll print that out and they'll post those labels on that box, and that will be your door, so to speak. So you're having them send it to the Amazon warehouse, but this will basically include the quote of everything. So the price per unit, the shipping cost, and obviously customs fees. So they take care of customs. You don't have to worry about any of that. You're just paying a per unit price with price to your door. So that actually, just to recap, that's going to include, so the customs fees, the air shipping fees, so the shipping fees, and then obviously the price per unit. So if you just ask price per unit and you pay for price per unit, well, okay, you might get $3 per unit, but then you're not paying any of the customs fees yet. They're going to upcharge you later, and you're not suspecting that, so you might not have factored that necessarily into your budget. So you want to ask for all these because maybe the per unit custom fee might end up being like 10 cents total because you're paying like $100 or $200 or whatever for customs. Random examples, I'm just telling you. And then obviously maybe another 10 cents per unit. So then really your cost per unit is $3.20. And obviously if you're ordering like 500 units, that's going to make a big difference. So that's something to keep in mind. Remember, yes doesn't always equal yes. No doesn't always equal no. They drive hard bargains. You can bargain back, and you can also play each supplier against each other to a certain degree. Don't get greedy, but don't take it at face value either. Talk to many suppliers. Also, don't just settle with Alibaba. If you do Alibaba, that's fine, but also Alibaba, DHgate, Thomasnet, and Google, great places to source from. And finally, make sure that you choose air shipping, and ask for a price to your door quote.